Is there really such a thing as a perfect sales pitch? Well, according to science there is, and here it is. If you have a service or product to sell, I am going to teach you a formula that is based off of neuroscience to craft the perfect sales pitch that will help you sell anything to anyone, okay? Sales is very much like climbing stairs, and every step you take is intentionally moving you towards the end. So the acronym that we are going to use is S.T.A.I.R.S. S.T.A.I.R.S is an acronym that stands for Start with Attention, Tell Your Narrative, Arouse Anticipation and Curiosity, Introduce the Reward, Reel them in, and Secure the Close. S.T.A.I.R.S outlines how you approach each step of the sales process to create your perfect sales pitch. Okay, nothing that you do should be without intention when you're moving towards the close. So this framework is a proven step-by-step process to make sure the words and information you are presenting have a repeatable, scalable framework to catapult you into sales success. So, we live in a world of distractions, right? Especially more so today than ever before. You've got your smartphone, text messages, emails, endless alerts. Okay, it is easier than it has ever been to get distracted. And no matter how important the information you're presenting to someone is, it doesn't matter if it's not heard or interpreted clearly. Now the problem is that even if there are no outside distractions, we are still always dealing with the one distraction that a person can never turn off, their brain. Okay, you are constantly in a battle with seen and unseen forces, and you are constantly competing for attention. So S in the S.T.A.I.R.S acronym stands for Start with Attention. Okay, so when you're walking in, you need to instantly grab the other party's attention, and you have to establish that you are worth listening to. One of the biggest misconceptions in sales is that it's all about the actual stats and the information. That's false. It is actually how you present the information and how you position yourself from the time you step foot in the room up until the time the deal has been closed. Okay, when a group of humans are all in the same room, there's an unspoken power struggle from the start. Okay, and even if you don't realize it, we're all competing for the alpha position in the room. You do it, I do it, all humans do it. It's instinct. And it's a result of the way that our brains evolved and are wired to receive and process information. Okay, so if you don't quickly establish that you're worth listening to by grabbing their attention, the rest of your presentation will be an uphill battle. So, to understand how to grab attention, we first just need to understand the brain and how it actually receives information. Okay, so there's three main parts of the brain. Okay, there's the part known as the primal brain, then there's the midbrain, and then there's the neocortex. Okay, the primal brain is the oldest in an evolutionary sense, and it's a core part of your brain. And when we pitch, we're not pitching to the neocortex, which is the part of the brain that understands logic. We're pitching to the primal brain. Okay, and the primal brain, it only understands emotions, memories, and motivation. Okay, so to get their attention and to get them intrigued, you need to first appeal to the primal brain before you start appealing to the neocortex. Okay, does that make sense? So avoid what I call the two blocker, meaning that if you start your pitch with too much detail, too many stats, or too slow, or too familiar, boring, the receiving party's primal brain is gonna shut down, and you don't even stand a chance, okay? You might as well pack up and go home before the rest of your pitch. So remember, new, interesting, it's never been done before, different. So now let's move on to T. T in the S.T.A.I.R.S acronym stands for Tell Your Narrative. Okay, narratives or stories, they are very powerful tools for relaying information. They're so powerful that about 10 to 15 years ago, the government actually used your tax dollars to study how stories affect the human brain and how stories are used as a tool to heavily influence. Okay, so they hired a team, there was 47 neuroscientists, and they did all kinds of research, and then this is what they found out. It's fascinating. They found out that information is never enough for an audience to fully engage, and until a story is presented, there's no emotional involvement. Okay, so stories are so powerful. Storytelling hooks the listeners in, and it automatically engages them at an emotional level, and then it allows for the information to start flowing in. Okay, it leads to empathy and trust. But why is this? Why do our brains favor stories so much? Well, it starts with how we evolved. Okay, for 150,000 years, storytelling has been the dominant means for communication and human interaction. I'm talking about even before writing existed, humans relied on stories to preserve their histories and their beliefs and to keep them safe. Okay, there's been an evolutionary rewiring of human brains to make sense of the world in story terms, okay? So if we truly want to give the perfect pitch in its grandest sense, we must first come to appreciate and then use storytelling in our pitch to get past the ultimate gatekeeper, which is the human brain. Okay, becoming an expert storyteller, it almost feels like it's cheating, okay, because it gives you such an unfair advantage over the competition. Okay, and this is also one of the most commonly missing pieces or misused pieces from people's pitches and presentation. They don't have a good structured story. Keyword, structured. Okay, a good story in your pitch has a very structured layout. Okay, and it uses very specific elements that you are going to leverage to flow freely to the listener. Okay, every good story, it's not complete without a crisis. All right, this is one of the most important elements. There has to be tension and distress. Okay, so something bad happened. Something got in your way. Did someone get hurt in your story or sick? Or did they experience pain? Okay, when a story is being told, what happens is the brain starts processing distress, and when the brain processes distress, there's two chemicals that get released. Okay, the first chemical is called cortisol. All right, and cortisol focuses our attention on something important. Okay, so the more distress, the more cortisol is released, and the more that you are forced to pay attention. The second chemical that gets released is called oxytocin. Okay, and oxytocin, it's connected with care and connection and empathy. Okay, so they did another study years ago on people donating money to a charity. And they were donating after hearing a distressing story. Okay, and the conclusion was that the participants who experienced more cortisol and more oxytocin were way more likely to donate money. Okay, the ones that relieved both of these chemicals donated much more. The amount of oxytocin released determined how much a person would share. Okay, so this element literally changes behavior because it changes our brain's chemistry. So do not skip out on not only presenting the challenge, but you also have to make sure in your story you twist the knife, okay? And you magnify just how deep the problem is. Too many people, they'll slightly scratch the surface with their problem and then they just rush right into what they're selling, okay? So tell a good story. A in the S.T.A.I.R.S acronym stands for Arouse Anticipation and Curiosity. So no matter how good your story or pitch was, it doesn't matter how good, the brain at this point in the pitch is now going to be fatigued. Okay, the opposite party's brains, they're tired. Listening to new information, even if it is in story form, it requires the brain to use a lot of energy. Okay, the brain is lazy. It never wants to work harder than it has to. And so the minute that the brain thinks that it can fill in the blanks of what someone is talking about, or that it has it all figured out or it's seen it before, it'll shut off. Why is this? Because as humans, we love to solve things. It's rewarding because it alters our brain chemistry by giving us a hit of dopamine. You've probably heard that, I know you've heard the word dopamine before, but what exactly is dopamine? Okay, dopamine is a chemical in the brain that is involved with reward, motivation, memory, and attention. Okay, and when large amounts of dopamine are released at once, it creates feelings of pleasure and reward, which will then motivate a behavior to repeat and to do it again. But there is a huge misconception about dopamine. Okay, many people think that dopamine is released once the brain receives the reward, but that's actually untrue. The brain actually receives dopamine when there is an anticipation of a reward. So think of like Wheel of Fortune, for example. Okay, when you think you figured out the word or the phrase, that's when you actually get the dopamine rush, not when you actually see the solved words on the screen. Okay, there's very famous neuroscientist, Robert Sapolsky. He conducted a study of dopamine in the brain. Okay, and he conducted a few different experiments on monkeys. So in the first experiment, he trained a bunch of monkeys to know that when there was a light that was flashing, that if they pressed a button 10 times after the light appeared, that on the 10th press, they received a food treat. Okay, so the neuroscientists then measured the amount of dopamine released in the monkey's brain in coordination with the timing and the food reward. And what he found out is that the monkeys were actually receiving the dopamine as soon as the light came on. And it lasted all the way until the 10th press of the light. All right, so it lasted all the way up until the food reward. Dopamine was the trigger for the monkeys to keep pressing the button until the food reward arrived. Now, in the second experiment, here's where things really get interesting. When the light came on in the second experiment and the monkeys pressed the button 10 times, this time they only got the food reward 50% of the time. So then when he went back in and measured the amounts of dopamine this time, he found out that there was twice as much dopamine released in the brain when they only got the food reward 50% of the time. Okay, so you see in the experiment that unpredictability increases anticipation. So when the monkeys expected the treat in 100% of the endings, and they knew they were going to get a treat every time, they got a decent amount of dopamine released. However, when they only got the food reward in 50% of the scenarios, the dopamine release increased. Okay, getting food 50% of the time was the least predictable situation for the monkeys. Okay, so build up the anticipation and have some unpredictability in your meeting presentation. Okay, so remember this equation. Anticipation plus unpredictability minus neediness equals control of the entire room. So now let's move on to I. I in the S.T.A.I.R.S acronym stands for introduce the reward. So now we're at the point in the pitch where we are introducing the reward. Okay, and the reward is being the business that is up for a deal. Okay, so this is the transaction phase. It's time to talk about the terms and the money that will be exchanged. So we've saved all the details for this phase. So this should be the first time you're introducing this. So the way that we've structured the entire pitch has been to trigger the want response. So now the people you're pitching to, the listeners, they want the reward. They want the dopamine. So think about it like this, okay? Have you ever just really wanted something? You wanted it, you're gonna get it no matter what. The details didn't matter. You didn't need to justify it. You didn't care what other people said. All you cared about was obtaining it. Okay, that's the kind of emotional response that we have built in our whole pitch up until this moment. Okay, and the last element to the reward phase is at this point you need to start using filtering language, which is portraying disqualification. Okay, so what we do here is we display high status positioning while also letting them know, hey, it's okay if you don't meet the criteria. Okay, this is also the point in the pitch where I actually start packing my stuff up. I click my pen so the point goes in, and then I put it in my pocket, and then I close the portfolio in front of me. It's very calculated, it's very intentional. Okay, you've answered all the questions, you've introduced the price, you've laid down the deadlines and expectations, so now you're going to transition to the next part in S.T.A.I.R.S, the R, which is reel them in. So, you have successfully performed every other step, and now we have arrived at the R step. Okay, the R step, at this point, it's all about looking for nonverbal and verbal clues to see if you've done an effective job up until this point to reel them in. Okay, one of the ways that I can tell at this point in my pitch is the people I'm pitching to, they almost start doing my job for me. Right? They start selling themselves, or they might even bring up their own conceived benefits about the product or service that I didn't even mention. And they might start even referring me to other people who could find value in the product or service without me even asking them. Okay, that's how you know they're in. So don't overcomplicate this stage. You know, it's time to stop selling at this point and reap the rewards. Because what'll happen is if at this point, if you've done everything right, if you keep trying to sell them and, an overkill, you could even start going in reverse at this point. So stop. Now, if you feel like they aren't in and they aren't contributing to the energy in the room, remember, you need to be willing to just walk away. Okay, I've had situations where I got to this point and they didn't seem receptive, okay? And I said, all right, well, I've got to get going. I have another appointment to go to. And then there's been times that they responded, they jump up, oh, wait, we're in, or wait, didn't you want to grab lunch or something, Ben, before you head out, or something of that nature, okay? Because sometimes the very act of walking away can actually reel them back in or just give them that gentle push to verbally commit. Okay, this whole step, it ties in with the law of reciprocity. Okay, they feel like at this point that you've given them a ton of value, so now they want to start giving value back. So again, don't overcomplicate this step. You know when there's chemistry in a room and you know when you've done your job. So, no matter how much you have triggered the want factor in the customer's brain, and no matter how much at this point that they've sold themselves and said they were in, you got to remember that no one's ever gone to the bank and deposited a verbal agreement. Okay, you can't deposit hopes and feelings. So S in the S.T.A.I.R.S acronym stands for secure the close. Now it's time to get the deal to the finish line. However, again, no matter how much chemistry there is in the room, no matter how much you've triggered the want factor in the customer's brain, and no matter how much they've sold themselves and said they were in, like I said, you can't go to the bank and deposit hopes and feelings. If there's no money, there's no deal, no matter how bad they want it. Okay, so there's always a few different scenarios that can play out right before you sign the deal. And it's important to mention at this point, you have to hold posture here more than ever before. Don't start getting weird when it's time for money to be exchanged and all of that. Okay, so the most ideal situation here is obviously that they just sign, you work out the payments, and you move on. However, many times at this point in the pitch, you'll start getting hit with a lot of last-minute grabs for more concessions, okay? So before you enter the last-minute request stage, you need to mentally know and commit with what's the wiggle room that you're willing to give, meaning what more will you give to make the deal work, and what is the absolute most you'll give. Okay, know that point. And you need to draw a line and again, be willing to walk away from anything that is more than that. All right, so if they say, hey Ben, is there any chance for a discount at this percentage? We want XYZ. It's either yes, we can make that happen, or no, that's not gonna work. It's yes or no, stick to it. Okay, and then there's also situations that are out of your control with the close, But if it's a good deal with your ideal customer, then just be willing to work through them. Okay, I'm not talking about giving them more wiggle room or concessions. I'm saying sometimes there's literally situations, depending on the industry, where there's some legalities or regulations that they need to work through. Okay, just stay relaxed and hold posture as you work through these terms until you've secured the close. It's true, you can't take the elevator to success, but you can definitely take the stairs. Thank you everyone for watching this video. Make sure you like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what your biggest takeaway was and if there's a topic that you want me to cover in my next video. I'll see you next time.